Hello everyone, I welcome you all to this lecture as we have covered what the concept environment is, what was the historical developments before the Stockholm, and to some extent we also highlighted about how Stockholm is so important in the history of international environmental law. In a very single words, we can consider Stockholm as the baseline of modern international environmental law. It also is so important that all the domestic laws developed afterwards had been actually derived from the Stockholm Declaration. Stockholm could not produce any legally binding instrument or document like treaty or convention. However, the declaration itself is so important that one can understand the significance of Stockholm when one look at the subsequent developments of international environmental law. This is how Stockholm can be considered so important. And when we say baseline, we basically imply something which is developed from a particular threshold. Actually, in a very literal meaning, the word baseline is like the line from which the whole maritime areas are measured. It is the same that when you talk about international environmental law and its developments, you start from Stockholm because this is the first gathering of the global community in terms of emphasizing on human environment of the planet for humans' existence and survival in the days and years ahead. So if I start with the Stockholm Declaration, if you look at uh, the preamble, it says that man has the fundamental right to freedom, equality, and adequate conditions of life. Now, these right to freedom, right to equality, and right to adequate condition of life must be in an environment of equality. That means the right to freedom or right to equality or adequate condition of life cannot be exercised without a quality environment. So this is how environmental issue is being connected as the vital issue in exercising one's own human rights. Now, what does that mean by the quality of environment or quality environment? It says that the environment of equality that permits a life of dignity and well-being, which means that you need an environmental you need an environment or ambience where you have a life of dignity and your own well-being. And he bears a solemn responsibility to protect and improve the environment for present and future generations. This is also very important that apart from highlighting what human should uh, exercise and entitled to as right, the declaration further stipulates that human is also bound to certain duties, and those duties or responsibilities includes protection and improvement of the environment. So that means by the time world communities gathered at Stockholm, they have this understanding that our human environment on earth has not been in its proper condition. That's why it needs to be improved, and this improvement cannot be highlighted without uh, bestowing certain duties upon the human. And most important part of this paragraph is that responsibility to protect and improve the environment for the present and future generations. So present and future generations, when something including a sort of responsibility and anything is, you know, allotted for both present and future generation, we call that sustainable development. So sustainable development, I mean, you will hear the terms overwhelmingly all around that the term is even not only occupied the space in the environmental, or rather everywhere you find the word sustainable is being used. Sustainable economy, sustainable agriculture, sustainable fishing, sustainable housing. So what we what they try to emphasize is that when we say sustainable something, it is not only for the generation existing now, it is also for the generation who will be coming in future. So our responsibility should not only be for the present generation, but also for future generations. Now the question is, how can we specify something which is or which should be for the present generation or future generation? For example, if the government is planning to install a power plant in a forest, now, it is true that you can build a huge power plant. However, you must also consider at the same time that this forest is not only benefiting us, it will also benefit the future generations. It is not only us who are getting the benefit in terms of oxygen emission and carbon dioxide reduction by the forest itself. Those in future who will be coming, the upcoming generations must also have the right to get that ambience which we are entitled. Therefore, for that generation, we must keep the forest, a kind of species or fishes or a kind of plants which of course, let's say it is only a kind of fish which is available uh, in a particular lake or zone. Now, if some measures are taken which will extinct to that fish, then certainly this project should be abandoned, because the way we are enjoying the benefits or we get that fish, the future generation should also get that. So sustainable development implies you take any kind of actions, projects, or installments, or buildings, something, whatever you take as your measures, you must make sure that the existing benefits should also be, even if not, kept as it is, but to some extent should be exercised by the future generations. That's why it is called sustainable development. Your development cannot deprive the future generations from exercising something. So that is what the issue is. A more important fact is that, I mean, one cannot deny the fact that when you take any developmental initiatives or activities, a certain range of prejudice to the environment is bound to happen. If a road is built through wetlands, certainly the flora and fauna of the wetland in future will not be intact. I'm sure they will have certain range of impacts on those forests, on those wetlands species. However, the calculation must be made in such a way that the minimal cause and effect is to be suffered. This is called sustainable development. We will have, I think, more discussions on that. Okay, so I think this was the first principle of Stockholm Declaration, stating that in order to enjoy rights, freedoms, equalities. Environment is important. It further says, apart from the rights, we must also bear the responsibility, and the responsibility is to protect and improve the environment, not only for the present but for future generations. So, principle of sustainable development, principle of responsibility to protect are all reflected here. The second principle of Stockholm Declaration states that the natural resources of the earth, including air, water, land, flora, and fauna, and especially representative samples of natural ecosystems, must be safeguarded for the benefit of the present and future generations through careful planning and management as appreciated. So I do not want to give much explanation to this for the reason that we have already explained what sustainable development is and how things should be articulated here. So I think it clarifies that uh, all the natural resources and the world has not, I mean, one must keep in mind that every part of the earth, I mean, every zone of the earth doesn't have equal significance. For example, Amazon forest is more important than a particular city for the reason that or then a particular other areas for the reason that it contains the, I think, largest diversity of species, flora and fauna and whatnot. So that's how the importance of the Amazon for the global community is much higher. So therefore, uh, I think what environmental law first admits is that we cannot stop the development, but we must make sure that the development does not extremely, prejudice the environment. So thank you, and we will be discussing more on the subsequent parts.